And I assume we have about 15 minutes per presentation.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so I think we can start because it's already 5 in Poland. So good morning, afternoon, good evening, depends on the time, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us for today's seminar, Climate Change, Adaptation and Resilient Livelihoods. This event is the second seminar in our ongoing series organized by the Central Asia Program and the Asian Economy Center of Civitas University. And it's focused on climate change and sustainable development challenges in Central Asia. Climate change has become a structural pressure across the region, shaping economic stability and human security. Rising temperatures, water stress, extreme weather events, and environmental degradation are placing increasing strain on livelihoods, public services, and institutions while exposing long-standing vulnerabilities. We are delighted to welcome our speakers today. Vadim Ni, director of the NGO Social Ecological Fund in Kazakhstan, member of the Compliance Committee of the Aarhus Convention from October 2002 to June 2011, and of the Compliance Committee of the UNECE Water and Health Protocol from October 2013 to October 2022, who will address today key challenges and solutions for climate adaptation in Central Asia. We welcome Brendan Dupree, who serves as co-chair of the PRME Chapter Eurasia and founding director of the Sustainable Kazakhstan Research Institute at Narhos University. His work on climate resilience and sustainability transition recognized by organizations such as UNECE and UNESCO. He will address today climate change and systems thinking, the rising need for an integrated approach. We welcome Fabienne Bossut, who is Associate Professor at the Ghent Institute for International and European Studies at Ghent University. In addition, she is co-director of the EURIS platform of Ghent University. Her research expertise includes the European Union's relations with Eastern Europe and Eurasia. She will address today the importance of boosting societal resilience in the fight against climate change in Central Asia. Last but of course not least, Nurzan Mukashev, who is assistant professor and director of the Center for Health Policy and Management at Suleiman Demirel University in Kazakhstan. His research focuses on healthcare resilience, climate change, and health equity, with applied work on climate-related disruptions in Central Asia. Today, he will address organizational adaptation of healthcare systems to climate change in Central Asia. Thank you all for joining us, and I look forward to an engaging discussion. But before we begin, a quick note on the format of today's seminar. Each presentation will last 15 minutes, and after all speakers have presented, we will have a 30-minute Q&A session. I kindly invite everyone to submit their questions via the chat box, and I will moderate the discussion later. With that, let us begin the seminar. Vadim, please. Can I ask you to?
Thank you, Katarzyna.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's not worked like this. Okay. Okay. Good afternoon, dear participants. It's a pleasure for me to make a short presentation today. I will begin my presentation by briefly recalling some fundamental issues related to climate change. At the global level, the increase in average temperature has already exceeded 1 degree Celsius. It's almost 1.1. And we assess the climate changes over the periods of 10 years and more. However, Central Asia is characterized by an arid and continental climate, which makes our region warm faster than the global average. For example, in Kazakhstan, for the period of previous 30 years, the average temperature has been rising by 0.36 degrees Celsius per decade, while the global average rate of temperature increase has been around 0.19 degrees Celsius per decade. So it's almost double faster. Climate change manifests itself through a number of direct impacts. Among them, for Central Asia, we are experiencing glaciers melting, changes in precipitation patterns, and an increase in extreme weather events such as heat waves, floods, wildfires, etc. We're already observing ecosystem shifting, river flows are changing, and species of flora and fauna are migrating. At the same time, we are facing serious socioeconomic consequences of climate change, including water scarcity, damage to infrastructure, even to some extent forced migration, and growing risk of conflicts. On the next slide, you will see some timeline of extreme natural events that have occurred in Kazakhstan and to some extent in Central Asia in recent years. Summer of 2021, a severe heat wave in Central Asia led to water shortages and a lack of livestock feed, even to disruption of international trade between Central Asian countries and Russia. September of 2022, a forest fire in the Kostanay region of Kazakhstan resulted in one fatality, affected about 9,400 hectares of land and destroyed 91 houses. Next 3 years followed by another major forest fire in the Abay region, which destroyed more than 60,000 hectares of forest and caused 14 deaths. And then the spring of 2024, the worst floods in Kazakhstan in the past 80 years affected over 120,000 people and flooded 70,600 houses. We were all lucky last year. There was no very, I would say, catastrophic extreme weather events, but that's 4 years in a row we experienced such events. Next, I would like to focus on two major water bodies in Central Asia. The international community is well aware of the environmental disaster of the Aral Sea. However, similar processes are now affecting the much larger Caspian Sea. And it was only last year through the Save the Caspian campaign that we were able to draw both national and international attention to what is happening there. Over the past 20 years, the Caspian Sea level has dropped by 2 meters, largely due to the climate change and altered precipitation patterns in the Volga River basin. In Kazakhstan, these changes are particularly visible because the northeastern part of the Caspian Sea is shallow. This is also, you can see it's on the images, satellite images. This is also the area where oil production takes place, and the declining water levels are creating serious challenges for maritime oil pollution. On the next slide, you can see the projected climate change impacts on the Caspian Sea and its ecosystems, which are under different climate scenarios. Higher temperatures means further sea level decline and more severe consequences for ecosystems, economies, and local communities. Some may argue that fluctuation in the level of the Caspian Sea are cyclical in nature indeed, but islands in the ocean have also appeared and disappeared over the time. However, this does not prevent us from recognizing the existential challenges faced by small island states in the context of climate change. Cyclical arguments should not distract us from real and accelerating risk. Meanwhile, the Aral Sea basin is highly vulnerable to climate change due to the melting of the Tian Shan and Pamir glaciers. This further exacerbates water scarcity, which is already one of the most critical challenges in Central Asia. So according to the projections presented in the Asian Development Bank report, by 2050, the water deficit in the Sirdarya river basin may reach 35% of the total demand, and in the Amudarya river basin, it will be even higher, up to 50% of the total demand. So what we can do at this stage, what solutions are already available for us? I will present it's on next slide. Possible measures includes conducting vulnerability assessments and developing climate adaptation plans at national and regional levels, as well as some micro levels too, as it necessary for project development. Of course, it requires to support scientific research on climate adaptation, strengthening international cooperation on the Caspian and Aral Seas, developing intergovernmental program for the conservation of the Caspian Sea water resources. Then we can use modern remote tools for expanding remote monitoring and information exchange on forest fires, floods, and other natural disasters, and also establishing a regional early warning system to ensure timely and effective alerts. And at the level of enterprises, communities, cities, improving water use efficiency across different sectors. And let me conclude my presentation by noting that this year, Kazakhstan will host the Regional Ecological Summit on 22nd, 24th April in Astana. Recently, I prepared a comprehensive analysis of Kazakhstan's environmental challenges, along with proposed solutions for the United Nations Resident Coordinator Office in Kazakhstan. This analysis will be presented at the summit. I hope it will serve as a foundation for informed decision-making and concrete follow-up actions by Kazakhstan, and possibly other Central Asian countries will find this research useful. Thank you for your attention, and I will be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Vadim, for your insightful presentation. Brendan, the floor is yours.
Okay, you see my presentation?
Yes, perfectly.
All right, so my presentation is on climate change in Central Asia, more specifically Kazakhstan, and the need for an integrated approach through systems thinking. This work was something that we actually have published on with Harvard Davis Center for Russian and Eurasian Research. We published a publication called Digital Silk Road in Central Asia, Present and Future. And my institute has been working on that for the past few years to follow up from the publication, which was in 2022. So what is the Belt and Road Initiative? Um, President Xi Jinping officially announced the Belt and Road Initiative in 2023 in an official visit to Kyrgyzstan. Um, it's about 1.3 trillion USD in investments, mainly in ports, highways, and other infrastructure projects. The initiative affects approximately 60% of the world's population and 35% of the global economy. Trade along the Silk Road could account for almost 40% of the world's total trade, and it's the largest investment project in human history. And naturally, as being such a large trade and corridor of trade infrastructure investment, there's extensive social, economic, as well as environmental impacts of these projects. As you would naturally assume, trade increases climate risks. And so here you can see some of the corridors for the Belt and Road Initiative. You have on land and also maritime route corridors. And if you draw your attention to the area of Kazakhstan, you can see that there's a few significant land routes which go through Kazakhstan, both into Russia and Europe, but also down through the Mediterranean region. So for an investment in this scale, there's very little precedent on how to analyze, let alone manage the ecological and climate impacts of these huge investment projects. And naturally, the projects are cumulative as if, for example, if you invest in a new road system, then it attracts new cities and increased economic flow of workers in those areas where these trade corridors are being developed. And as a result of that, climate emissions increase. And so there's a need for an integrative environmental assessment of these projects. So here you can see the Western Europe, Western China Highway, which is about 8,444 kilometers long. And so you need to look at it from an integrated environmental approach because there's impacts, for example, in infrastructure, which causes increased population flows, like I mentioned in the previous slide. You have atmospheric impacts through increased carbon emissions and air pollution by the use of fossil fuels. Biosphere is impacted through loss of habitats and the road kills of animals that are crossing these land-based corridors, as well as habitat fragmentation. Geosphere is impacted by roads through soil erosion and landslides. And the hydrosphere is impacted through pollution and sediment runoff, littering, and of course, impeding drainage and also the impacts of climate change along the hydrosphere. So what is the Belt and Road Digital Science Program? The Digital Belt and Road is international science program for sustainable development of the Belt and Road region using big Earth data and Earth observation technologies. And it advocates for the integration of big Earth data to design, plan, and monitor different aspects of human activities along the Belt and Road countries. And the mission is to build partnerships and engage the public and stakeholders to design, develop, and implement demonstrative projects that illustrate the value of big Earth applications for achieving these sustainable development goals. And so you might ask yourself, what is big Earth data? Maybe some of you know. It's kind of multi-scale, high-dimensional, multi-temporal data. So this includes like ocean-based observations, communication satellites, like remote sensing satellites, navigation satellites, and ground-based observations. And big Earth data science is meant to study from a holistic perspective and in a multidisciplinary way complex Earth systems in order to understand how to manage, store data on various platforms, to forecast and to identify future Earth trends based on digital data. And so the DBAR, so the Digital Belt and Road Initiative, the program is meant to address dealing with gaps in the understanding of Earth as a system and also facilitating sustainable use of natural resources by collective and individual actors in fragile environments. And essentially, there's 65 countries which are participating throughout the world. The aim is to use the data to implement concrete projects for the implementation of the SDGs worldwide, in particular in the areas that the Belt and Road Initiative of the Chinese government is impacting. And so the whole idea is to not just think of climate change as a topical issue, but look at how climate change is interlinked and integrated into all different um, topical areas, as I mentioned before, through this integrated approach. So the Belt and Road Initiative and the infrastructure projects and transportation corridors are having significant positive but also negative impacts in relation to the Sustainable Development Goals. And this needs to be looked at from an integrated approach. And so Central Asia is critical to the Digital Belt and Road Initiative. Why? Because, again, some of the major land transports are going through Kazakhstan, for example. It also contains vast natural resources, and it has access to European markets. And so if you look at something like sustainability challenges in Kazakhstan, you have nature-based economy primarily, water scarcity, which was talked about by the previous presenter, mass urbanization in major urban areas like Astana and Almaty, climate change, and also the significant loss of glaciers in the Tuyuksu Glacier area and more broadly in the Tian Shan Mountains. And so, talking about this integrated approach and the need for systems thinking, if you look at, for example, Tuyuksu Glacier next to Almaty, which is the feeding the main source of water supply for the city, you have an increase in climate change, which is creating a situation where the glaciers are melting rapidly. At the same time, you have intense urbanization, which is happening in Almaty, and there'll be about half million more people in the city by 2050. And you also have infrastructure, which is old and rusted, like water pipes. And so you have a lot of waste in water. So you will expect in the future water scarcity in the city of Almaty. And so if you want to manage that, you need to manage it from an integrated systems thinking approach. And something like the Digital Belt and Road Initiative can be very beneficial to try to analyze and solve these complex interlinked problems linked with sustainable development and specifically climate change. And so the Digital Belt and Road program focuses on some specific foci. And you can see these here. You have agriculture, food scarcity, natural heritage, urban infrastructure, coast and marine, high mountain areas, et cetera, et cetera. And then those foci areas are supposed to seek to support the implementation of specific sustainable development goals. Here you can see kind of how it looks. You have these data streams. You have the Big Earth data platform, You have the foci points that it's seeking to focus on, and then there's SDG highlight reports of good practices using the Digital Belt and Road Initiative, and there's some financing for some specific projects that are seeking to use this bigger data system to manage some of these complex problems in those foci areas. One interesting point is that they've created these centers of excellence. And so this is like cooperation with state agencies that are collecting this big Earth data. And they have these centers that they're establishing, and these centers are supposed to share data with the Big Earth Data platform of the Chinese government in order to collect data sets that can be used to integrate and to put on this Big Earth data platform. Um, it's very interesting, but there's been some challenges in that. And so I'd like to address that before I conclude my presentation. Naturally, when you're talking about sharing this type of data, bigger data, there are some ethics and security concerns on how the data is going to be used and interpreted. And also, will it be openly presented to contributors? So there are some trust issues by partner countries in the Belt and Road Initiative countries, target countries, on sharing this data with the Chinese government and for them to manage this platform. So what I recommend is that the fairness principles are implemented where data must be findable, accessible, intertemporal, and reusable when possible. And so some of the opportunities that exist is to build trust and collaboration between Belt and Road countries, support the implementation of the SDGs on a regional level, build capacities, improve knowledge of big data experts of the Belt and Road countries, integrate some technological advancements, and upscale national and regional examples of using this big Earth data in order to multiply that throughout the and upscale those examples throughout the Belt and Road Initiative countries. So if you have any questions on that, you're welcome to reach out to me. I left a link to the publication. So if you're interested in learning more, you can find it. It's pretty well cited and published online. So feel free to click on it and to read it and reach out to me personally if you have an interest in the topic. And please follow our institute on Instagram here in Kazakhstan. It's quite popular for um, embassies and for research institutes. I know it's not common practice worldwide, but please follow us. We have a lot of information on our current and upcoming projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Dupree. So next up, we have a presentation prepared by Professor Fabienne Bossut. Maybe you can share the link in the chat box, the
I
link.
will do that right now. I'll do it right now.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm using Teams typically here at the university, so Zoom is always for me searching a little bit, so apologies for that. Okay, so okay, do you see the slides?
Like the whole PowerPoint,
Yes.
not the slides only.
You see the whole PowerPoint?
Yes, but not like the
Yes.
slides only, but maybe
Only the slides?
not only the slides, also like the whole PowerPoint. I mean the all of the details here. Maybe you can try, yeah, from beginning. Yeah. It's not working, but it's okay. Like the
No,
presentation.
no, I want it to
Oh,
work. Okay, so but I'm sharing, so then how do I make sure that you see the full presentation, not just the separate slides?
uh, maybe you can like use this like upper button that there is like next to the title of the presentation. There's also this from beginning button.
Yeah, I've used that.
Maybe at the bottom is this icon for the screen at the very bottom. Maybe you can try that under the picture.
Or maybe I first need to start my presentation and then share it. Maybe that's better.
But still, we can see the slides, so maybe smaller, but they're visible.
Do you still see my slides now, or did I stop sharing them?
No, we can see the slides and the whole PowerPoint, so it's okay.
Sorry. No,
Oh,
but I
no.
just, yeah, this is annoying. Sorry. I'm not used to using Zoom anymore.
Yes, but I think we can start.
Sorry,
Oh,
I'm just gonna
yeah.
start again.
You stopped sharing.
Okay, well, I'm gonna start, right, because we don't want to lose any time. So sorry for this, I apologize. I will be talking about the need to boost societal resilience to climate change in Central Asia. And my argument draws on insights from post-development thinking. So this chapter was published already, I think, 3 years ago, and it's part of an open access book published also by with support from the OEC Academy in Bishkek. And so this book was edited by Rahat Sabirbekov, Indra Overland, Roman Vakulchuk. So some of you maybe already had a look at this book. So now, why does climate resilience matter in Central Asia? I think the previous speakers already highlighted several points. I don't have to repeat them, but okay, so Central Asia faces increased heat waves, glacial melts, pasture degradation, which are threatening the ecosystems, and then also problems with the water supply. Now, of course, these climate stressors also endanger the rural livelihoods across Central Asia. They also threaten economic stability and food security across the whole region. Now, what we also witness in Central Asia is that we have issues with governance, meaning how to then deal with this at the state level.
Fabienne, I'm so sorry. Slides are not changing. I mean,
yeah, it's because I really don't know
but you
how
can
to
just
do it
like
via
use
Zoom.
yeah, but you can use the slides, like use the this left side of the slides. Just click on them. Oh yeah, exactly. And we will see, like, as you see in the PowerPoint.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's perfect. Yeah.
So what are you seeing now?
Yeah, we see why climate resilience matters in Central Asia.
Okay.
Because we see like the whole screen, not only slides, but the whole screen. So we also see this left side where there are all slides there and everything. So we see like the whole PowerPoint. Okay,
So
thank
now
you.
you see the right slide, right?
Yeah. Why climate resilience matters in Central Asia.
Okay. Yes. So that one I already. So yeah, I was mentioning that there are also issues with governance. So we already saw this also during the COVID pandemic. So if you have crisis of such magnitude, we noticed that the governments struggle to deal with them. And we see this also with the climate crisis. And this brings me to the main point. First of all, the need for resilience. So given the urgency of the climate crisis, so the states, but also societies really need to be able to adapt very swiftly to the effects of climate change, to mitigate these effects. But specifically for my chapter, I want to focus this let's say, studied societal resilience and the importance of this. Why do I come to this point? Well, we have seen also in Central Asia how society sort of managed to fill in the gaps left by states and governments. And so similarly, we can also argue when it comes to climate issues, given the tradition across the region, when it comes to local solidarity networks, volunteer actions, we can really see that there is this potential for strong community resilience and resourcefulness. So now I hope you can see my next slide. So how do we define resilience? So resilience is the ability to mitigate, adapt to, or withstand shocks. Now, one of the issues that I address in the chapter is that donors, the international donors, many of them have been quite actively promoting the notion of resilience, also when it comes to fighting climate change or in dealing with the consequences of climate change. But what we can notice is that donors, when they promote resilience, they sort of do this by using quite a neoliberal framing, meaning that they shift responsibility onto the individuals, very much emphasizing efficiency and risk management. And so on top of this neoliberal framing, they also have quite a top-down approach, where they just, use externally existing templates and just expect that these will work in the case of Central Asia. I think this is still a very predominant tendency that we have. And so what we can notice is that resilience from within is still insufficiently supported. We also can see this, for instance, with the European Union. So the European Union is one of the major donors in Central Asia when it comes to climate issues, including climate resilience. Although they officially sort of recognize the local ownership, you can see that they still, in practice, do very little with this, and they still tend to also deliver these ready-made solutions and expect the Central Asian countries just to copy-paste them and expect them to work, irrespective of the very specific context that we have there. And then moving on to my next slide. So then this brings me to post-development thinking. So for those of you who are not familiar with post-development thinking, so the school of thought emphasizes very much the value of self-reliance, which is linked to the notion that it's people who are the agents of their own change, and they should act based on their local knowledge about what is good for them. One of the most well-known concepts here is the notion of buen vivir, which comes from Latin America, which very much emphasizes well-being that goes beyond this neoliberal economic growth. And across the global south, we can see different manifestations that are very similar to buen vivir, and actually in Central Asia, you can also see this. So here we see traditional forms of self-governance linked to, for instance, the trust networks, the importance of reciprocity, mahala practices, then, for instance, the agsakals, also this tradition of ashar or kashar, which represent these collective work traditions. Then moving on to the next slide. So to go a little bit deeper into this, so we can see in Central Asia how trust networks facilitates mutual aid during emergencies. And this creates a sort of informal safety net, and they strengthen community bonds. Also, we can see that role of the local elders, whether they're aksakals or others, they act as respected mediators and decision makers, and they enjoy a lot of respect across the whole community. Then we also have what I already mentioned, the collective voluntary labor practices. So this involves cooperative labor that improve shared infrastructure and also foster mutual responsibility. And so together we can see a lot of informal forms of resilience mechanisms that enable the communities to quickly respond to crises and to enhance also when it comes to climate, to really enhance climate resilience, especially in remote areas. And this brings me then to the case study that I've used in the chapter. Because it's, of course, mainly the mountain areas that are struck the most by the effects of climate change in Central Asia. And one of the examples here is pasture or pasture management, especially, for instance, in Kyrgyzstan. Now, interestingly, what we have seen is that community-based initiatives in Kyrgyzstan have already improved the outcome. So 40% of grasslands expanded thanks to the local restoration efforts. Now, an important element here is that Kyrgyzstan introduced a pasture law in 2009, and this really did have a beneficial effect in the sense that it facilitated decentralization, also made sure that there would be elected pasture committees. And then we can really see also how there's cooperation now set up between herders, communities, and NGOs. So to elaborate a little bit more on this, so we can see forms of community-based governance, so local communities that manage pastures through elected committees, and they regulate the grazing and they restore the degraded lands. We can also see how participatory actions like rotating grazing and infrastructure repair supports grassland recovery and also climate adaptation. Then there is a supportive role for NGOs. So we have seen mountain NGOs that connect communities with the policymakers and then promote the local knowledge and adaptive strategies. And as I mentioned already in the previous slide, so there is also the impact of the legal framework. So the 2009 pasture law in Kyrgyzstan really has empowered communities with a legal backing to implement sustainable pasture management. Then to give you two examples of locally rooted organizations. So we have the Alliance of Central Asian Mountain Communities, and they promote the self-organization and the local adaptation strategies, and they include villages in Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Kazakhstan. Then there's also the Central Asian Mountain Partnership, which is funded by the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation. And they use participatory community-based approaches, and they also support reviving traditional pastoral knowledge. So what do we mean with that? So they incorporate nomadic pastoral practices, and this really then helps to strengthen the resilience. And an example here is the Cholpon Pasture Users Union that integrate the ancestral knowledge. And then we can also see again the importance of the traditional government's bodies, such as the Akimat and so on, and they're really crucial for the mobilization. Now, what message can we give to donors? So as I mentioned previously, international donors such as the European Union, but also UNDP and the World Bank, they have been quite active in promoting resilience to climate change. But as I mentioned, their approach is quite neoliberal in nature, it's quite top-down. And so there are several limitations to their approaches. So their standardized models often shift this responsibility to the local communities without really empowering or acknowledging them adequately. And this is why there's a need for these alternative participatory models. There are already some donors, such as the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, that adopt those community-centered approaches, which really respect the local governance and cultural context. So we really need to have a shift from, we have to shift to inside out rather than outside in perspective. So what can we conclude in terms of the key arguments of the chapter? First of all, Central Asian societies have strong traditions of self-reliance, and local actors already contribute to climate adaptation based on their traditions of self-reliance and their traditions also of their knowledge, their ancestral knowledge. And so the international donors should shift from this neoliberal to a more post-development logic, because resilience should be built from within and not imposed externally. And community-driven adaptation is really essential for the future crises, especially given the limitations also of Central Asian governments and states. And to conclude, well, I don't have to mention it here. You all know that the climate challenges, unfortunately, will intensify in this current decade, but of course also afterwards. And the state-led adaptation is insufficient. That's why community-led practices are essential. And so donors should recognize local agency. They should support the existing structures more, and they should foster the homegrown meaning of good life and self-reliance. And last but not least, resilience becomes sustainable only when rooted in local knowledge, practices, and aspirations. And on that note, I will end. And also just to remind people who are interested in my chapter, so it's available in that book and it's open access.
Thank you very much, Professor. So we have our last, but of course not least, presentation for today. Professor Nuzhan Mukashev, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I hope you can see my slides well.
Yes, we can.
So let me talk about our experiences, and also set up some context in relation to the healthcare and climate change, and especially in Central Asia. So everyone understands that climate change is a health crisis because all of the potential impacts it has both on the health of populations, on basically all the infrastructures that prevent diseases and treat diseases, which is like healthcare systems. And it is already highlighted by international like educational organizations in healthcare, both medical and public health specialties, that climate change as the competencies should be part of the knowledge and education systems. So we basically should train our healthcare providers to understand climate change, its risks, and know and practice adaptation and even more like mitigation activities. And I will talk more about that as well. So here we have like different initiatives run by United Nations and its subsidiaries like World Health Organization. And one of the good examples and actual great initiatives internationally is the Climate Change and Health Lancet Countdown, which is basically the annual report that tracks very important indicators. For instance, different infectious diseases statistics internationally, and shows how climate change may be impacting these statistics. And I think another indicators here is on the slide, like vulnerability and adaptation assessments and health national adaptation plans for health. So when we talk about climate change adaptation, each country is free to introduce different initiatives, including healthcare related activities in these plans. And here there's a resource that is run by Alliance for Transformative Action on Climate and Health, where they basically aggregate different national initiatives that supports climate change and health. And here actually we can see that not all the countries committed to improve, basically run adaptation and mitigation activities in relation to health and health systems in nationally. So I think like several, not all the Central Asian countries basically committed for that. In relation to different initiatives in terms of training healthcare providers internationally, here you can see the examples of climate resilient classrooms type of activities that are um, basically run globally. And here there's the global consortium on climate and health education that helps to promote these knowledge and skills, uh, initiated by Columbia University and the consortium. And here there's different organizations that support this activity. And here on the map, actually you can see that the Central Asia is out of this kind of not really support and participate in this activity. And here in Central Asia, if you zoom in, you can see like our Suleiman Demirel University, Center of Health Policy and Management, as well as the local national university in Almaty, named by Asfindiyarov. So these centers are basically supporting this activity. And this is the framework suggested by World Health Organization for, it's called Operational Framework for Building Climate Resilient and Low Carbon Health Systems. So it's very indicative of different activities that can be implemented by health systems and healthcare organizations, which I'm basically focused on today on organizational resilience. And when we talk about the healthcare organizations, hospitals in particular, we understand that healthcare systems are one of the major carbon dioxide emitters, or basically greenhouse gas emitters. And in this way, the healthcare organization's role in mitigating is very important, mitigating climate change, and both adapting to that as well. So it's kind of like vicious cycle happening here. And when we talk about hospitals' GSG emissions activities, we can implement all the GSG protocol activities through scope 1, 2, and 3. And all these scopes can be tracked to different services and functions within each healthcare organizations. And these are important things actually we are talking here in Kazakhstan, for instance, in our educational and research activities in relation to healthcare providers. And sustainability in healthcare is important, and we can see a lot of different cases worldwide where hospitals and health systems implement different climate change mitigation activities, introducing green technologies in their practices and seeing actually like both savings and environmental impacts in the United States. And here we have international IHH Healthcare. It's a big corporation that runs hospitals worldwide. And here on the slide you can see different names like Acıbadem Fortis, etc. Parkway Hospital System. And these corporations basically they introduced the green indicators in their scorecards. And here in green you can see specific strategic measures aimed at capping their carbon, basically capping their carbon emissions. And I think it's very important and indicative that healthcare systems should be and is practicing climate change mitigation activities. And the thing is that when we, and especially in my education program, I teach MBA in healthcare programs here in Kazakhstan. And the thing is that when we should be talking about it as the educators, as researchers, to the community, to the industry and policymakers as well, that these practices should be implemented in Central Asia as well. But let me just scroll through. And another aspect of the Central Asia is that it's one of the big and kind of quite unique parts of the world. Here you can see 1% of the whole world population. It's vast, and 46% of the population is urban, and median age is quite young, among about 27 years. Major geopolitical site economically, and one of the fastest rates of global warming in the world. We already talked about that. It also should be highlighted that it has strong healthcare institutions, there is infrastructure and workforce. there are opportunities for improvement that remain in how healthcare businesses are run and how health policies are developed and implemented. And I completely agree with the colleagues with the presentations before that their local ways of practice and business are quite unique and different from the Western world. And I think as of now, the studies show that there is a lack of curricula that fully integrate the United Nations SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, and climate change in the region. The recent study, regional study, showed that they studied faculty and students in local universities in 4 countries, Central Asia, and showed that the SDG topics usually they didn't come from curricula mostly. They mostly came from the media, social media especially. They were seen in somewhere outside of the classroom and wasn't part of curriculum, which is a big problem, I guess. Yeah, and I think it's not only about education, but also it comes from like even higher level upstream, that not all the countries implement and introduce the climate change agenda in their strategic plans, like national plans. So I think that that's one of the places where we can like start the discussion in the society about that. Talking about our center, so I just want to highlight and specifically talk about the topics we discuss here in terms of organizational resilience. I'm a director of the Center for Health Policy and Management in our university. Süleyman Demirel University is located near Almaty city, the biggest city in the country, in Kazakhstan. And actually we're located in the region of Almaty, which is kind of a rural setting for us. And currently we are running a project. It's in the initial state. We are looking at the organizational resilience capabilities in the hospitals of Almaty Oblast. It's going to be a case study. We want to review, basically investigate the capabilities that are present in the rural hospitals in Almaty region that can help hospitals to withstand climate crisis like flooding, like heat waves, cold spells, etc. And here I think that's a good start for this kind of collecting empirical data in terms of how organizations are run. And I think it's quite different study maybe from the previous speaker, because we talked about the societal resilience, which is very important in Central Asia. Though when we talk about healthcare, with the professional services, in many cases the institutional settings are should be and are on the first front when they react to climate crisis. And here I think there's a certain opportunities in terms of studying and improving this organizational resilience, both in healthcare, and you can like extend to different other settings like education or social services at large. And as of now, we are seeing that there's certain lack of like common approach in terms of assessing both qualitatively and quantitatively organizational resilience in healthcare. And I think there's a like opportunity for collaboration, especially in the region, on this topic. And that's basically the highlight of the work we do here. And on the next steps, I think there's a good opportunity in Kazakhstan and Central Asia to see how like net zero strategies are implemented in healthcare settings, like carbon emission accounting, and like like energy management in healthcare organizations that helps to attain net zero goals nationally and also in the industry. So these are our next like ideas for exploration. And I want to complete my presentation with the message that climate and sustainability are no longer future topics in healthcare. They're in today's health providers' job description already. We need to invest in training health providers for climate resilient health and collaboration. It must be intersectoral, and we should also have these local and global partnerships present. And recently we have this initiative of Central Asia Climate Change and Health Network run by colleagues from Kazakhstan and supported by international peers. And I think that will be a good start for having fruitful partnerships in terms of addressing this issue. Thank you. And together we can shape resilient, sustainable healthcare for all. Thanks.
Thank you very much for the insightful presentation. So this concludes the presentation part of the seminar. We will now move to the Q&A session. And as I can see that the discussion is already developing in the chat, so I will ask the questions that have not yet been answered here. So the first question here is for Professor Nurzan. What strategies can healthcare systems adopt to anticipate and respond to climate-related disruptions effectively?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's very important. So when we study organizational resilience, that we see that there are proactive practices that prepare organizations to any crisis, like it's basically emergency preparedness activities, and we just give a spin in relation to climate, increasing the kind of risks and assessment of risks, and making sure that the resources are present for these risks. And the rest are just like when you react and act during the crisis itself. And I think these recipes are present in many emergency preparedness plans. And we already talked to our colleagues in the hospitals locally, and we've seen that they have like very strong emergency preparedness plans for earthquakes, for fires, but they don't really kind of assess and have like proactive preparation plans for kind of flooding, which is like lesser frequent risk, though we, as Vadim already told, that we having seen more flooding regionally. So I'm not sure whether I could answer the question, but I think again our work is starting, so we'd like to basically share the results in future with y'all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I can see Mr. Vadim.
Thank you, Katarzyna. I just would like to this discussion from different perspective. 6 years ago, I developed the legislation on planning the climate adaptation in different sectors of Kazakhstan, and we covered the sectors of water sector, forest sector, and then agriculture, and the emergency response. And then at that time didn't cover the healthcare as a priority sector for climate adaptation. And many people ask why you are not why it was not covered. I said that just because we are trying to deal in the conditions when we are lacking information, and the lack of information, and that's sometimes leads to the corruption processes. So at the time, we had no such studies in Kazakhstan like the one conducted by Professor Mukhashov. And now it's time to cover the healthcare as a priority sector for adaptation. In some cases, we should be more conservative because the planning and the resources, it deals with the corruption practices also. That's which should be cautious about.
Thank you very much. I also have a question for Professor Mukhashev when it comes to the strategies. What do you think, what role can digital health tools and data-driven, as Mr. Vadim pointed out, data, like that kind of approaches play in enhancing the resilience of healthcare systems?
Thank you for your question. I think that circle back to Vadim's point about like corruption. But here I will say that corruption of the data or quality of the data that we have on hand, because we've seen that information systems are present in healthcare in Kazakhstan, like from this perspective I can tell, but the quality is not ideal usually, and you cannot really kind of plan using this data. So probably more robust analytic methodologies are required to have like more or less valid responses to research questions we have in mind. And yeah, that's the main problem. And you can extend this problem further because everyone is talking about AI in healthcare and planning, but if the data is poor, the results, application results will be poor as well. And recently there were some talks, especially on, I was listening to the presentation from a person from Ministry of Ecology, and they were suggesting to implement kind of waste accounting type of activities and digitalizing this, though I wasn't sure because it might put extra burden on the healthcare organizations on the reporting part. So yeah, there was a lot of issues with that. So it's an ongoing picture. So I cannot really tell what is the answer.
Thank you very much. So I also have a question for all the experts today. How do climate impacts and adaptation strategies differ, like in all the planes we discussed today? What are the differences between urban centers and rural or peripheral regions when it comes to those strategies in all the planes that we talked today? Is there a difference?
I can start. It's as an example, when we are trying to adapt to climate change in agriculture. Of course, that's in the current situations that sometimes farmers are planning which crops to cultivate, and sometimes they're choosing the water intensive crops just because the previous years it was much more profitable to cultivate them, and then are facing that's water is not available. That is why it's important to work with farmers on raising awareness on climate change and the projected and potential and even current impacts on their activities. In cities, people are less, let's say, they're raising more aware of the climate change. There are some centers, universities, people who can explain to you, or you can use AI to get similar situation based on the experience of other countries or studies in some other universities, not in Kazakhstan, based in Kazakhstan or Central Asia, but we should not expect it immediately and short-term perspective from rural areas.
Thank you very much. We have one more question for you, I can see. How can local communities and governments collaborate effectively to implement sustainable adaptation strategies in the region?
It's a question to me, sorry.
Yes, yes. Sorry.
Sorry. How can local communities collaborate effectively to implement sustainable adaptation strategies in the region? First, I think we should start with awareness raising. It's still not communities in Kazakhstan and Central Asia are not very well aware of climate change and the adaptation, the necessity of adaptation to climate change. Even in the discussion and this chat, I presented an example when there was about the current planning of ski resort development in the mountains of near Almaty. And we are aware of some of us, aware of the studies on snow coverage in the Alps and the Northern America that's showing that snow coverage in the mountains is reducing, and which just makes ski resorts less sustainable. But still, the business and the project developers, and then finding the way to persuade the government that we should develop ski resorts. It's one of the examples when we are failing to implement sustainable adaptation strategies, in particular as it concerns a long-term planning. In agriculture, it's easier. You will not adapt, then you will fail. And the next year, unless it's about the gardening, you will adapt maybe next year or the year after the next year. But sooner or later, you should adapt to the climate change and the water availability. But in this case, you can construct for 5 years and then realize that is leading to even more water scarcity, the construction of ski resorts in the mountains of Almaty. I will refer also to the presentation made by Brendan Dupre, which mentioned that Almaty is already facing the water availability for drinking water supply, but we're trying to do even to make even more competition with the ski resorts for water, which are in the mountains of near Almaty.
Thank you very much. We have one more question for Professor Mukhachev. How can lessons from other regions be adapted in Central Asia?
It's quite a loaded question, I think. Yeah, I need context, I think.
I think it's about the what kind of healthcare strategies when it comes to the lessons can be adapted in Central Asia? Are there some strategies adapted in different regions that can be adapted in the region?
Yeah, definitely. So what we're seeing, I think there's a good example from Canada and United Kingdom that they have both national strategies that aim at the climate change adaptation, and they have networks of best practices or healthcare organizations that can share and teach each other. One part of it. The second is also, of course, implementing in the curricula of healthcare providers, healthcare managers, policymakers in training, and all the questions related to climate change and sustainability in healthcare. I think the national strategies on net zero, especially in Kazakhstan, is very important. It's already like the national priority with the support of the president, and there should be the roadmap or action plan that should be outline specific measures to implement these activities. So knowledge, political support, and best practices network. That might be the first and most important steps. And further down, of course, research that supports specific local contextual applications. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't see. Mm-hmm. Mr. Vadimni, please.
Yeah, I will add to this the question, the answer to this question. That's again in relation to this key resort development. We can easily use in this case the data. It's not necessarily to conduct full-scale that's research on the mountains of Tian Shan to identify the risk of ski resort developments, because it's we are facing this similar situation with the Alps and Northern America, because it's the same altitude and more or less it's the same conditions. But in some cases, of course, the research and the data from other regions, they should be adapted to the local conditions, because the context may be completely different. I think it's important area for us to how we can deal with the data and information. It's like you are using that some technologies which should be, when we are importing them, we should adapt to the local conditions. Not necessarily they will work like in other countries or regions.
That's true. That's a good point here. I see there are no more questions, so I think that we can all agree that climate adaptation in the region requires coordinated, data-driven actions, balancing technological solutions with strong community engagement. And we can emphasize that systems thinking, integrated approaches, all kinds of strategies are essential as climate challenges are interconnected with social, economic, and environmental system. And in the healthcare sector, we can stress that organizational adaptation must focus on anticipatory planning, equity, evidence-based, data-based interventions to protect vulnerable populations across all areas, with collaboration between local, regional, and international stakeholders. And we can also point that this can be considered as critical to translating research into effective policy and practice. I hope that we have managed to address all the questions here, as I can see. Thank you very much to our experts for their insightful and very, very important presentations. So I think the topic is extremely important, especially when it comes to social changes that are now visible, especially in the Central Asian region. And I want to thank to all participants for joining today's seminar. And I look forward to seeing you at the next one. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.